The moon called Varanthos 9 had been dead for longer than any species could remember. It hung in the black emptiness of space like a gray stone, forgotten by the star it circled. But deep inside this dead moon, carved into the very heart of the rock, there was a chamber that had waited for 3,000 years. The Glyph. The concord of 7 species had found it long ago. The Volari, with their silver skin and voices like music, had been the first to enter. They had stood in silence as their lights revealed walls covered in symbols. Billions of symbols. Trillions, perhaps. Patterns that twisted and spiraled and connected in ways that made the mind hurt to look at them. The symbols glowed with soft colors that shifted slowly, like oil on water, but they never changed their shape. They never moved. They never did anything at all. The Volari had tried to wake them. They sang to the walls for 50 years. Their most beautiful voices filled the chamber with sounds that could make other species weep. The Glyphs did not care. Then came the Kethrix, proud insect warriors with shells like black armor. They believed everything could be understood through force and radiation. They bombarded the walls with every kind of energy they knew. Heat, cold, light from dying stars, radiation that could kill a planet. The Glyphs flickered sometimes as if annoyed, but they remained silent. The Mavani came next. They were small creatures, no bigger than human children, but their minds were vast. They built thinking machines that could calculate the movements of entire galaxies. They fed the Glyph patterns into these machines and waited. Their computers thought for 300 years. Then they simply stopped working, as if they had given up. One by one, all 7 species of the Concord tried to understand the Glyph Hall. One by one, they failed. The chamber became a monument to frustration. Scientists still came to study it, but nobody expected answers anymore. The Glyphs were beautiful and mysterious, and that was all they would ever be. Then humanity arrived. The humans had only joined the Concord 40 years ago. They were the youngest species, barely children, compared to civilizations that had sailed between stars for millions of years. The other species found them strange. Humans were soft, with no armor or claws. They lived such short lives, sometimes only 80 or 90 years. They fought among themselves constantly. They felt emotions so strongly that it seemed almost like a disease. But they were curious. The Concord had learned that about humans very quickly. They asked questions about everything. They poked and prodded at things they did not understand. They broke rules just to see what would happen. When humans requested permission to study the Glyph Hall, the Concord agreed without much thought. It was a polite gesture, nothing more. The young species deserved a chance to fail just like everyone else. Dr. Sana Okonkwo led the small human team. She was 43 years old, with dark skin and gray hair that she kept short for convenience. She had spent her whole life studying dead languages and forgotten cultures on Earth. When she learned about the Glyph Hall, she had felt something pull at her heart. A feeling she could not name. She had applied for the mission without telling her family, and she had cried when she was accepted. The other species watched with patient smiles as the humans set up their simple equipment. The Volari observer, an ancient creature named Thessaly, felt a little sad for them. Such hope in their eyes. Such innocent excitement. They would learn soon enough. Sana spent her first 2 days simply walking through the hall. It was enormous, larger than any building on Earth. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above her. The walls curved and twisted, covered everywhere with those beautiful, meaningless symbols. She did not try to understand them yet. She just wanted to feel the place. On the 3rd day, she found a section of wall that interested her. The symbols here formed a spiral pattern, tight in the center and loose at the edges. It reminded her of Celtic knotwork from ancient Ireland. It reminded her of the patterns her grandmother used to draw in the dust when she told stories. Sana stepped closer. The symbols were smaller than she had realized, incredibly detailed. She leaned in, trying to see the tiny marks within the marks. She was very close to the wall now. Close enough that her breath touched the stone, and the symbols began to glow. Sana stumbled backward, her heart pounding. The spiral was brightening, each symbol lighting up from within like a fire had been kindled inside the wall. The glow spread outward, jumping from symbol to symbol, following paths she could not predict. She heard shouting behind her. The other species observers were running toward her, their voices high with alarm. But she could not look away from the wall. The light was spreading faster now, racing across the chamber in rivers of gold and blue and colors she had no name for. The Kethric's observers collapsed, their armored bodies crashing to the floor. The frequencies coming from the walls were too much for their senses. The Valari screamed in harmonies that shattered their own equipment. Within minutes, the entire Glyph hall was alive. Sana stood at the center of the chaos, her small human body untouched by the light that burned around her. She was breathing hard, her hands shaking, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. 3,000 years of silence. Millions of attempts by the greatest minds in the galaxy. And all it had taken was one human breath. She did not know it yet, but in that moment, everything changed. Not just for her, not just for humanity, for every species in the galaxy, for the galaxy itself. The symbols pulsed around her like a heartbeat, like a welcome, like a door finally opening after an endless wait. Thessaly the Valari, recovering slowly from the sensory assault, looked at the small human woman standing in the light. For the first time in her 300-year life, she felt something she did not recognize. Thought it might have been fear, thought it might have been hope, thought she was not sure. There was a difference anymore. Sana Okonkwo, daughter of Earth, student of dead languages, had just spoken the first word in a conversation that had been waiting since before her species existed, and the Glyph Hall was finally ready to answer. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species in the Concord knew what had happened. The Glyph Hall of Varentos 9, silent for 3,000 years, had awakened. And it had awakened for humans. Ships began arriving before Sana had time to understand what she had done. Scientists, politicians, military commanders, and curious observers from all 7 species crowded into orbit around the dead moon. The station that had housed a few dozen researchers suddenly needed to support thousands. The Concord's leading minds demanded explanations. They brought equipment that cost more than entire planets. They ran tests that took weeks to complete. They analyzed every particle of air in the chamber, every vibration in the stone, every flicker of light from the glyphs. The answer was always the same. The symbols responded to humans. Only humans. Nothing else. The Valari sent their greatest singers. Their voices filled the hall with sounds of heartbreaking beauty, songs that had moved entire civilizations to peace. The glyphs ignored them completely. The Kethric's brought warriors who had conquered star systems. They touched the walls with their armored claws, breathed on the symbols with their strange insect lungs, even bled on the stone. Nothing. The Morvani connected their most powerful thinking machines directly to the walls, hoping to find some hidden pattern. The machines hummed and calculated for days. The glyphs did not even flicker. But when Sana walked through the chamber, the symbols followed her like flowers turning toward the sun. When she touched the wall, new patterns emerged. When she spoke, the colors shifted in response to her words. The other scientists watched with growing unease. 3,000 years of failure. The combined knowledge of 7 ancient civilizations. And none of it mattered compared to one human woman simply existing in the room. Sana worked without rest, trying to understand what was happening. She discovered that different parts of human biology triggered different responses. Breath awakened the symbols from their sleep. Touch could guide them, moving patterns from one place to another. Voice made them change color and shape, as if the glyphs were trying to communicate back. And then came the day she cried. She had been working for 3 weeks without success, trying to make sense of patterns that seemed to shift every time she looked at them. Frustration built inside her like pressure in a sealed container. Finally, alone in a quiet corner of the hall, she broke down. Tears rolled down her cheeks and fell onto the stone floor. The glyphs beneath her feet began to glow brighter than anything she had seen before. New symbols rose from the stone, symbols that had been hidden beneath the surface. Layer after layer of meaning unlocked by human tears. When Sana reported this discovery, the reaction was immediate. Every human on the station was brought to the glyph hall. Breath, touch, voice, and tears. The 4 keys that opened different doors in the precursor archive. The Morvani, scientist named Kel, was the first to say what everyone was thinking. He was old even by his species standards, with wrinkled gray skin and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. He gathered the Concord's representatives in a meeting room far from the human researchers. His voice was quiet, but his words shook the room. The precursors, he explained, were the builders of the glyph hall. Nobody knew what they looked like or where they came from. They had existed so long ago that even their ruins had turned to dust. Only the glyph hall remained, preserved somehow against the weight of time. And now it seemed clear what the precursors had intended. They had built this place for a species that did not exist yet. They had looked into the future somehow, across millions of years, and they had seen humanity coming. They had designed the glyph hall to wait, silent and patient, until the right species arrived. Humans were not an accident. They were not just another intelligent species that had evolved by chance. They had been chosen, perhaps even created. The idea was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was both at the same time. The Concord began to look at humanity differently after that meeting. Some species felt hope. Perhaps the humans would share whatever gifts the precursors had left for them. Perhaps the young species would lift everyone up together. But others felt fear. The Kethric's hegemony, in particular, could not accept what had happened. For 3,000 years, they had guarded the glyph hall. They had considered it their sacred duty. Their entire culture had been built around the idea that someday they would be the ones to unlock its secrets. And now some soft, short-lived mammal had stumbled in and taken everything from them with a single breath. In the dark corners of Kethric space, whispers began. Whispers about humanity. Whispers about what should be done. Sana knew nothing of this. She was too busy learning, too overwhelmed by the wonders unfolding around her. Every day brought new discoveries. Every hour revealed new depths to the precursor archive. She did not see the jealousy growing in other species' eyes. She did not notice the cold way the Kethrics, observers, watched her now. She was standing at the beginning of something vast, and she could see nothing but light ahead. She did not know that storms were gathering in the darkness. More humans came to Varanthos 9. Scientists, soldiers, artists, and ordinary people who had been chosen for traits nobody fully understood. Some could make the glyphs respond strongly. Others could barely wake a single symbol. The precursors, it seemed, had been very specific about what kind of human they wanted. Sana led the research with growing wonder and growing fear. Each day, the glyphs revealed more of their meaning. They were not just symbols. They were not just art or data. They were a teaching system, a library built from light and stone. And they had a message for humanity. The first complete translation came after 3 months of work. A team of 12 humans, breathing and touching and speaking in careful patterns, managed to unlock a single passage. When the meaning became clear, several of them had to leave the chamber. One woman fell to her knees and wept. The passage spoke of seeding. The precursors, it said, had traveled the young galaxy when stars were still being born. They had found barren worlds and filled them with the building blocks of life. They had guided evolution on 1,000 planets, nudging simple creatures toward intelligence over millions of years. Every species in the Concord, every thinking mind in the galaxy, existed because the precursors had made it possible, but they had not made all species equal. The glyphs described different purposes for different creations. Some species were made for art, some for science, some for war. The precursors had been gardeners, planting different flowers for different reasons, and humanity had been planted last. Sana worked for weeks to understand the passages that described her species. The words were strange, concepts that did not translate easily into any language. But slowly, the picture became clear. Humans were made to adapt. Where other species were designed for specific environments, humans could survive almost anywhere. They could eat almost anything. They could live in deserts and frozen wastelands and the depths of the sea. They were not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but they were the most flexible. Humans were made to feel. The precursors had given them emotions of unusual intensity. Joy and sorrow, love and hate, hope and despair. Other species felt these things, but not like humans did. Human emotions were a fire that burned bright enough to light the darkness or destroy everything they touched. Humans were made to break and rebuild. Their short lives meant they could not wait for change. They had to force it. They destroyed old systems and created new ones in a single generation. They made terrible mistakes and learned from them faster than any other species. They fell down and got up and fell down again, over and over, always moving forward. The precursors called humanity their final children, their most dangerous creation, their greatest hope. And then the glyphs revealed why hope was needed. The passages about the enemy were harder to translate. The symbols twisted and darkened when humans tried to read them, as if the glyphs themselves were afraid. But piece by piece, the story emerged. Something lived in the dark between galaxies. Something old and vast and hungry. The precursors had encountered it at the height of their power, when they thought nothing could threaten them. They had been wrong. The war lasted longer than most species would exist. The precursors threw everything they had against the enemy. Their greatest weapons, their most brilliant minds, their courage and their desperation. And they lost. In the end, the precursors knew they would not survive. So they did the only thing they could. They hid their knowledge. They scattered it across the galaxy in places like the Glyph Hall, and they designed one final species to find it. Humanity was not just an heir to the precursor legacy. Humanity was a weapon. The enemy would come again someday. It might be centuries away. It might be millions of years. But it would come. And when it did, the galaxy would need defenders. The precursors had looked across time and chosen humans for this burden. They had given them adaptability to survive anything. Emotions strong enough to fight even when logic said to give up. The ability to break old limits and create new possibilities. Sana read these passages in silence, surrounded by her team. Nobody spoke for a long time. The weight of the words pressed down on them like a physical force. They were not special because they were better than other species. They were special because they had been made for a specific, terrible purpose. They were the galaxy's last defense against something that had destroyed their creators. It was honor and curse, wrapped together. That night, Sana walked alone through the Glyph Hall. The symbols glowed softly around her, responding to her presence. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived wars and famines and losses that would have broken other people. She thought about her parents, who had built a new life from nothing. She thought about every human who had ever faced impossible odds and refused to give up. Maybe the precursors had known what they were doing. Maybe humanity really was suited for this role. Or maybe it did not matter. Maybe what mattered was not why they existed, but what they chose to do now that they knew. The glyphs pulsed around her like they could hear her thoughts. She had a feeling the hardest questions were still ahead. The revelation broke something in the galaxy. Within weeks of the translation being shared, the concord of 7 species was at war with itself. Not with weapons, not yet, but with words and accusations and fear. Diplomatic meetings became shouting matches. Trade agreements collapsed. Ships that had traveled peacefully for centuries now moved with weapons ready. Some species demanded that humanity share the precursor knowledge immediately. The Valari argued that wisdom belonged to everyone. The Morvani said that keeping such power secret would only lead to disaster. They pleaded with humanity to trust them, to work together as the galaxy had always worked together. But other species saw things differently. The Kethric's hegemony withdrew their representatives from the Concord Council. Their leaders made speeches about betrayal and injustice. For 3,000 years, they said, the Kethrics had guarded the Glyph Hall. They had sacrificed resources and lives to protect its secrets. And now humanity wanted to claim everything for themselves. It did not matter that humans had offered to share. It did not matter that Sana and her team were working day and night to translate the archive for everyone. The Kethrics could not accept that their sacred duty had been meaningless. They could not accept that they had been guarding a gift meant for someone else. Border incidents began. A Kethric's patrol destroyed a human cargo ship, claiming it had violated their space. A human military vessel responded by disabling 2 Kethric's fighters. Both sides accused the other of starting the conflict. Both sides began preparing for something larger. But the worst damage was happening inside humanity itself. The burden of the precursor message was too heavy for many people to carry. They had lived their whole lives believing that humans were ordinary, that they were just one species among many, finding their way in a vast and indifferent universe. Now they learned that they had been designed, engineered, created for a specific purpose. By being so powerful, they might as well have been gods. Some humans embraced this knowledge with dangerous joy. They formed movements that claimed humans were superior to all other species. They pointed to the Glyph Hall as proof that humanity deserved to rule the galaxy. These groups grew louder and more violent every month. Other humans rejected the revelation entirely. They called the translations lies, invented by governments or corporations for unknown purposes. They refused to believe that their species was anything other than natural. Some of them attacked the research stations, trying to destroy the evidence. Most humans fell somewhere between these extremes, struggling with questions that had no good answers. Were they still free if they had been designed? Did their choices matter if their creators had already decided what they would become? Was it wrong to feel proud of being chosen? Or was it wrong to feel ashamed? Sana watched her team fall apart under these pressures. Brilliant researchers stopped coming to work. Some left Varanthos 9 entirely, unable to face the glyphs anymore. Others became obsessed, spending every waking moment in the hall, searching for something that would make the burden easier to carry. She found herself unable to sleep. The same questions circled through her mind every night. Why had she been the one to wake the glyphs? Was that choice or destiny? Did it matter? One evening, she sat alone in an observation room, staring at the stars through a thick window. She had been crying, though she did not remember starting. The tears had simply come, like rain from clouds that had been building for too long. A soft sound made her turn. Thessaly, the Valari observer who had been present on that first day, stood in the doorway. The silver-skinned alien was old and fragile now, but her eyes were kind. She sat beside Sana without speaking. They watched the stars together for a while. Finally, Thessaly asked a question that cut through all the noise in Sana's mind. Does it matter why you are what you are? Sana did not understand at first. She asked Thessaly to explain. The Valari spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. She said that her own species had wondered about their origins for millions of years. They had theories and beliefs and sacred stories, but they did not know for certain how they came to be. And in the end, that uncertainty had not changed anything important. The Valari still loved. They still sang. They still made choices that shaped their lives and their worlds. Their origins did not control their present. You are still you, Thessaly said. Whatever the precursors intended, whatever purpose they designed you for, you are still the woman who cried over forgotten languages on a planet far from here. You are still the woman who breathed on a wall out of simple curiosity. Your choices remain your own. Sana wiped her eyes. She wanted to believe that. She wanted it more than she had ever wanted anything, but she was not sure she could. Thessaly seemed to understand. She placed one thin, silver hand over Sana's and squeezed gently. Perhaps that is the point, she said. Perhaps the precursors did not just give you tools and warnings. Perhaps they gave you a question. Knowing what you are, what will you choose to become? Sana looked at her old friend. In that moment, she felt something shift inside her. Not an answer, but the beginning of one. The precursors had made humanity for a purpose. But purposes could be accepted or rejected. Burdens could be carried or set down. Weapons could be used for defense or for harm, or could be laid aside entirely. Humanity had a choice. They had always had a choice that Sana realized might be the most important gift the precursors had given them. 5 years had passed since Sana Okonkwo breathed on a wall and changed everything. The galaxy was different now. The concord of 7 species still existed, but it had been broken and rebuilt so many times that the original name felt like a joke. Old alliances had shattered. New ones had formed. Wars had been fought and stopped, and fought again. Humanity had changed most of all. They had unlocked perhaps 1/10 of the precursor archive. That fraction alone had given them technologies that made their old achievements look like toys. Ships that could cross the galaxy in days instead of years. Energy sources that would never run out. Medical techniques that could heal any wound and extend life far beyond natural limits. With that power had come choices. Some humans wanted to use the precursor gifts to dominate. They built weapons and armies and talked about a human empire that would rule all other species. They pointed to the Glyph Hall and said it proved humanity was meant to lead. These voices had grown loud and powerful over the years. Other humans wanted to share everything freely. They believed that cooperation was the only way forward, that the galaxy needed to stand together against the darkness the precursors had warned about. They gave away technologies and knowledge, trusting that generosity would build trust. Most humans, as always, fell somewhere in between. They argued endlessly about what was right, what was safe, what was wise. Governments rose and fell based on these questions. Families divided over dinner table debates. The burden of the precursor legacy touched every human life. Sana had become something she never expected. She was no longer just a researcher. Over 5 years, she had become a symbol, a voice that both humans and other species listened to. She did not want this role. She had never been comfortable with attention or power. But she understood that someone needed to speak for reason and hope. And she had not found anyone better suited. Today, she stood before the Concord Assembly. The great chamber was filled with representatives from every species. Valari with their silver skin, Kethrix in their black armor, still hostile but finally willing to talk, Morvani with their vast minds, and humans, so many humans, watching from every corner of the room. Sana looked out at the faces before her. Some were afraid. Some were angry. Some were hopeful. All of them were waiting for her to speak. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. A curious woman breathing on a wall. A cascade of light that had shattered 3,000 years of silence. Revelations that had nearly torn the galaxy apart. And through it all, one question that nobody could answer. What should humanity become? She took a deep breath and began. "We did not ask for this," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. "None of us did. When I walked into the Glyph Hall 5 years ago, I was just a researcher trying to understand something beautiful. I did not know that my breath would wake sleeping gods. I did not know that everything would change." She paused, letting the words settle. "For 5 years, we have fought about what the precursor legacy means. Some say it proves humans are superior. Some say it proves we are dangerous. Some say it was all a mistake, a trick, a trap. And some say we should ignore it entirely and pretend nothing has changed. I have thought about this every day for 5 years. And I have finally found an answer. Not the answer, perhaps, but an answer that feels true to me." She raised her hand toward a blank wall of the chamber. The surface had been built from precursor designs, installed during the assembly hall's reconstruction. It could display images and data, but it needed a human to activate it. "The precursors gave their gifts to humanity," she said. "But they built the Glyph Hall in a place all species could reach. They left it unguarded for 3,000 years. They let everyone try to wake it, even though they knew only humans could succeed. I do not think that was an accident. I think they wanted us to have this conversation. They wanted the galaxy to see humans receive the inheritance, and then they wanted to see what we would do with it." She pressed her hand to the wall and breathed. The surface blazed with light. Patterns formed, shapes that every species in the room could understand. The first lesson from the precursor archive, translated into every language. "Ready to be shared, Dog. We were made to be inheritors," Sana said. "But I do not think we were made to hoard what we received. I think we were made to be teachers, guardians, partners." She turned to face the assembly fully. Her eyes moved across the room, meeting the gaze of Valari and Kethrix and Morvani and human alike. "The darkness is coming. We do not know when. We do not know how. But the precursors warned us, and I believe them. And I know that we cannot face it alone. No single species can. Not even humans, with all the gifts we have been given. So I am proposing something new. Not a concord of 7 species watching each other with suspicion. Not a human empire ruling by force. Something that has never existed before. A partnership. A true partnership. Where we share what we have learned and learn from what others teach us. Where we prepare for the darkness together as one galaxy." The room was silent. Sana could feel the weight of every eye on her. She could feel the fear and hope and doubt pressing against her from every direction. She smiled. "Just a little. I breathed on a wall 5 years ago," she said. "It was not a grand gesture. It was not a battle or a sacrifice. It was just a small moment of curiosity from a small human woman. But it was enough to wake a sleeping world. Maybe that is what humans are for. Not to conquer or rule or stand alone, but to wake things up, to start conversations, to take the first breath, and then invite everyone else to keep breathing." She gestured to the glowing wall behind her. "This is the first lesson. There are thousands more. Millions, maybe. Enough knowledge to change everything for everyone. I am offering it freely. No conditions. No price. The only thing I ask is that you learn it with us. That you stand with us when the darkness comes." She looked out at the assembly one last time. "We did not ask for this. But here we are. So let us get to work." The room erupted. Shouts and arguments and applause mixed together in a chaos that shook the walls. Some species rose to leave in anger. Others rushed forward to embrace the humans near them. The Kethric's commanders stared at Sana with an expression that might have been hatred or might have been respect. Thessaly, watching from a balcony above, smiled with tears in her ancient silver eyes. And on the wall, the precursor glyphs pulsed like a heartbeat, welcoming a galaxy that was finally ready to listen. The first breath had been Sa's, but the conversation was just beginning.